In this video, we're going to take a quick look at some lists. We're going to also look at a way to make a loop inside of an application, or let's say game in WPF. But the main core concept behind this video is for us to take a look at lists and use those lists to be able to maybe populate something like a list box. So let's go ahead and get started. You're going to open up Visual Studio. I'm in Visual Studio 2019, but all of these things still apply. We're going to be using WPF in this one. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. Once that new project comes up, I can go up here in the search and I can type WPF and I can type VB. And then I'll be able to get this. You see down here it says Visual Basic, Windows Desktop. This is the one I want. I'm going to click on that and click Next. Go ahead and choose where you want to save it. And then go ahead and create. You want to also name your project whatever project name you want to put here. And this is the location where you're going to save it. I'm kind of skimming over that part because actually for this video I'm assuming that you already know how to start up Visual Studio. You already know how to save your project and name those things. So this is not an extreme beginner video. So these things you should already know. Alright, so at this point I have my window. And now what I want to do is add the UI components that I'm going to need to be able to code it in the back end. So I'm going to need a list item because I know I'm going to have a list of some kind. So I'm going to go over here to the tools. And I'm going to go to the common WPF controls. And I'm going to go and grab a list box right here. And drag it on there. In WPF, when you drag it, it's going to give you these little boxes on the edge. These are control points where you can just drag the size that you want. And as you do anything up here, it's going to reflect down here inside of the XAML down here. So this is just a representation of what's going on down here. We're not going to get into XAML, but just understand that every time you add something up here, it's going to show down here. And if I add something down here, it's going to show up here. Alright, so after I add this, the first thing I want to do is name it. I'm going to name this LST items. And the LST stands for list items, and I'm writing that in camel case. So the first word is lowercase LST, and then every other word after that is uppercase, capital ITEMS. Alright, so now I want to go ahead and add myself some kind of button. And to be able to add something to this list box, I'm going to change the text in that button, the title in that button, to A. Now what I did was I clicked it once, slow clicked it twice in order to get in there to be able to edit the text, the title. If I clicked it fast, it would have written code for me, which I did not want right now because I want to name this first. So, but there's another way you can change this content. I'm going to select the button. I'm going to go over here to the properties, and I can go to the content right here and change it right here. So that's just another way to do it. Then I'm going to go up here to the name, and I'm going to change the name to BTN, lowercase btn, and A. That's going to be button A. And so button A is just going to add A to the list. Before I move in any further, I want to go ahead and create button A so that way I can see that it works. Once I have button A working, I can get all the other buttons to work. I'm also probably going to need some feedback, so I'm going to create a label here. And then I'm going to change the name of that label. I went inside the label, deleted the content. I can also, again, select the label, go over here and remove the content from the content property. So once I select the label, I'm going to go name it LBL. LBL message. Alright, so it looks like I have most of the things that I need, and I can add buttons later. So now I can go on the back end and add the code that I need. So I'm going to go over here to the main window.vb. The other way to get to that is in the solutions panel. Go to main window and go down. You want to open up that file. go down, and you'll see this main window XAML.vb. When you go back there, you'll see that there's nothing back there, and I can start coding whatever I need to code. But I know I'm going to be coding in this button, so I'm going to double click this button, and what you'll see is that it wrote that procedure for me. And I want to do a test first. Always think about doing a test first. So what I want to be able to do is add something to the item, that LST that we created. So I'm going to type LST items dot add, and I'm just going to add a to that. Alright, so before I move forward, I want to make sure that this works. I'm going to hit play or start. And yes, it adds it directly to that list box. Now, what I want to be able to do is when I select something on the list box, I want to make it go into the message box. So you see how I'm taking this in a methodical fashion. I do one thing first, make sure that the thing works the way I want it to work, then I move on to the next thing. And I'm testing it every single time I make something significant happen. I don't do this, then do this, then do something else. So I'm making sure that my progress is exactly the way I think it should be. And when I start the program, I'm running it to see if what I expect to happen is actually happening. So now I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to go ahead and make the ListBox select function. Except I'm not going to write that one either. I'm going to go ahead and select this ListBox. I'm going to go here to the events. So the ListBox is selected. I'm going, instead of the properties, I'm going to the events. I'm going to select on that event button. And then I'm going to find the selected item. Selected change right here. And I'm just going to double click this. Now, I already named this, so that's why I'm going to double click it. You always name things first before you do anything like this. So I'm going to double click on that. And as you can see, it automatically made this procedure for me. Right below the selected change, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a variable. So I'm going to give myself an LBI variable as a string. And what that LBI is the sender dot selected. All right, so I have this sender dot selected item. Now, don't be surprised if you don't get any IntelliSense on this, because it doesn't really know what this is right now. So this is why it wouldn't give me any IntelliSense. It doesn't know what's coming in. So I actually know what's coming into here. So this is why I just made it. I know I can put selected item because I know what's coming into here. The kind of object that's coming into here is a list box. And that list box has a selected item. So I'm able to put that into this string. And then what I want to be able to do is send that to the LBL message dot content. And that's going to equal LBI. And maybe LBI, this LBI stands for ListBox item, but it's not really the ListBox item. It's actually the string to the ListBox item. So I'm going to say ListBox item content. So let's see this work. We'll play. Start that. Do that. As you can see, it's here. And actually, so I don't want to just put a there. I want to add something to this. So I want to say something like, you have selected whatever item. It is now active. And there's a couple of ways I can do that. I'm going to show you the long way, just so that way you know how this stuff works. So I want to concatenate, meaning combine some text plus whatever this is. So first of all, I'll put the text in front, and I'm going to say, you have selected. Okay, and then I'm going to, right after that, space, and then the quotes, I'm going to put plus. And then now I want some other text after this, so I'm going to put plus here. And then I'm going to say something like, it is now active and ready to use. All right, so let's try that. This definitely should work. Hit that, and there's our message. So now we actually have a full circle of things that we now can just add other buttons to. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it. Then I'm going to move it over. And then I'm going to change the content of this. So I'm going to do it the long way. I'm going to select this. I'm going to go back to my properties by clicking on this little button. I'm going to go down here and select, put B down there, not select. I'm going to type B in there. So then I want to change the name from btna underscore copy to btnb. Now I'm going to double click this. And now I have btnb here. And all I have to do is do this. And type B. And so because of how all of this is working, it'll all work exactly like the first one, because we evaluated the first one. So I'm going to do this, and when I type B, it says you have selected B, you have selected A. So how can I use lists with this? Because actually I don't want to just add these things directly to this. I want to add these things to a list, then add it to that, so I can move that list around. Right now is a direct connection, which is not really good. So I can't really use what I'm selecting. It's just showing me that, oh, A and B is selected, and it'll keep on going. So if I already have an A there, maybe I don't want another A there, or whatever I might want to do. I just want it to come from a list, not just because I'm selecting a button. So let's look at how we can do that. The first thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and create a list box. I'm sorry. We need to create a list. So I'm going to dim myself items list. Okay, and that's going to be as a new list. And that new list is going to be a list of string. So now that I have my item list here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create myself a function instead of adding this directly, to where when I add something, it's going to add it to this first, then it'll go ahead and add it to, it's going to add it to this first, and then it's going to go ahead and put it to the list box. So let me go down here and create a function. And I'm going to show you guys a little trick here. So I'm just going to, if you're in Visual Studio, I'm going to remove that, and I'm going to create a function like this. Add item. Now, add item doesn't exist. This function or procedure does not exist. So as you can see, I have this function, this procedure here. I have this procedure here. I have this procedure here. So I don't have an add items procedure. That's why the squiggly lines are there. So I'm just going to I'm going to let Visual Studio make it for me by going to this little quick action button. And I'm going to click generate method. And it wrote it for me right beneath the procedure that I'm working in. Now, if you're a beginner, what I would say is it's important that you write this yourself, because it's going to help you learn. But a lot of times when you're working and you're deep into something, you want things to happen a little bit faster for you, because you already know how to write this, and you don't want to keep on doing that over and over again. It's such repetitive work. So this is what you want to do. Other than that, go ahead and write it, because if you don't write it, if you don't type it out, you're not going to learn it. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take what was here, right? And now I'm going to add that here. Now the only difference here is that I don't want this to just add A. I want it to add whatever button is using it. So this is A, so this should give me A. And when I put this same thing in B, it should say B here. So instead of this text being here, I'm going to go inside of these parentheses here, and I'm going to type item to add as a string. So that's a variable there. And I'm going to take that variable, and then I'm going to replace that A. Now all I need to do is take this procedure that I have here, and you see it's an error now, because what does the error say? It says argument not specified for parameter, items to add. Because I added this here, it's saying that it needs that property, that argument in there. And what's the argument here? The argument is going to be A. So now let's test that before I move on. And we see that it works exactly the same. So now what I want to do is take this, and I'm going to go ahead and replace B as well. Since we know A works, we know B works. And then I'm going to want all my button clicks. I'm going to copy this and paste it under there. So now the problem still remains the same. The problem is, that we're still, even though we have this here and even though this works, it's still adding it directly to the list box, which we really don't want. We wanted to add it to the list first and then go to the list box. So I'm going to make sure I go down here, and I'm going to go ahead and add a list. Take this variable here, list items, and I'm going to use the add command that goes with that, and I'm going to take this variable here and put it inside of there. That will allow me to go add all my items inside of this list items. Now what I'm about to do right now is add a loop, but first, before I do that, I want to show you that this right here is not adding it into this list box here. It's adding it into this list variable we have here. And this variable is of a list of strings. So every time we use the add command here, it's going to keep adding it over and over again, like stacking it on top of the next. So it's not going to remove anything unless we explicitly say to remove it. So if you have a list of things like that, it's imperative that when you want to get that entire list, you do what's called loop through that. You iterate through it. So in order to iterate through a loop like this, well, the easiest way, the best way, I think, the more efficient way to loop through something like this is to use something called a for each loop. And so what I'm going to write is for each item. Now, I could have easily just write for each whatever, right? This is just a variable. And then I'm going to say for each whatever in items list, which is this list variable we have here. Now what it's going to do is it's going to go through each item in that list, and it's going to put it into this variable one at a time. Now I can use this variable for whatever I want to use it for. Now, even though this is a legitimate variable, no one can really read that. It's not readable. So the idea behind this, and this code will work, but the idea behind this is so it could be readable. So I want it to sound like this, and you should do this to yourself and read it. For each what in the items list? Well, there's items in an items list, so I want to say for each item in an items list. So not items, because this is putting one item at a time in there, right? So with that said, I want to go ahead now and add each one of these items, or each item, inside of the list box. So I'm going to say lst item dot items dot add. I'm going to add to that its items list. And what am I going to add? Each item that comes in. So I know this may seem like a roundabout way. Well, why didn't we just keep it in there before? Well, because now we have this variable that I can move around, I can change up before I even show the user anything. And then I can show the user once I'm done manipulating it on the back end. So to the user, it's going to look the same, but we do have an issue here. So I'm going to hit start. Now, initially, it looks right. But watch what happens here. Because when I clicked it once, it added A into the list. So there's one A in the list. So now when I add another A, look what it did. Because there's two A's in the list. So that's why I added 2 there. Now, we now know that there's 2 A's in a list. When I click this, it's going to add another one, which will make it 3 A's in a list. As you can see, it added 3 here. But this is really not the action that we want. We know this is not an error. Maybe this is an error in our understanding, but it's not something we can't fix. We just don't want the user knowing seeing every time they click it, seeing all 4 come in, because really we don't have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things in there. We only have 4 things up in there, but because it's adding to the user interface every time, the user believes that they have all these different things in there. So what we have to do is we have to clear this out and add the list all over again, so that way the user can actually see what's actually in their list. And what we're going to do, the way we do that is we're just going to take that list box and then we're going to clear it every single time it's used. So now to the user, it should look the same, and we're going to be getting the same amount every single time. So I'm going to hit play, start. Now it's acting like we expected it to act. And now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items in our list without it adding 6 at a time every time we click it. So you see, on one end, the user can now see what's actually happening, but on the other end, we can actually use that list for whatever we wanted to use it for. As a matter of fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here every time you click it. I'm going to put a message inside of the message box. So that's going to be LBL message.content will equal. What do I want this to equal? You have how many items in there? You have list items, items list. So I'm taking this items list here, this variable here, and I want to see exactly how many is in there. Dot count, but I would need to turn that to text, to a string, and then I'm going to make a space in your list. So let's hit start. So you have one in your list, okay? You have 2 in your list. You have 3 in your list. As you can see, we have 3 items, right? You have 4 in your list. Now if I click this, all this stuff still works out, but every time I add something in my list, you have 5 in your list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so now we see how we can, this is one of the reasons. So we're now building on something that can actually grow over time. So now you can add as many buttons as you want, and you're now adding them to a list, and you can remove things from a list too, by the way. So it's, instead of add, it's just a remove function, and that's not the point of this right here. But the real point of this is so that way we can understand the whole process of how we just developed this. But let's say if I wanted something like some sort of health bar or something. What I can use for that, let's just do a test and hope it works. I'm going to go to all WPF controls, and I'm going to look for a progress bar. I'm going to drag this progress bar over here. Okay. All right, so I'm going to call this progress bar. I'm going to select it and call it progress bar health. Okay, so now I have this progress bar health, and what I want to look at this progress bar health, I'm going to go down to these properties, and I notice it has this value thing here. So I'm going to select that value, and I'm going to put 10 there. And you notice when I put 10 there, it goes 10% of what the value is. I mean, what the full capacity is. And I'm going to put 100. And as you can see, it goes all the way to 100. And what if I put 50? It goes 50% there. So I can see that if I were to add values inside of this health bar, I can actually get some health information coming in. I get some feedback from my users. So maybe if I click on one of these things, it gives me some feedback from the users. So what if I did something like this? Every time I click the item, right, and I add an item, every time I add an item, I can go into my add items procedure. Instead of adding into each one of these, I can go here, and then I can say progress bar health dot value equals, let's just say 10 for now. Okay, so now I'm going to run this, and let's see if that would work. Hold on, let's see what's going on here. So the issue here, one of the issues here is that I got my progress bar inside, I believe. Let me see. Okay, so let me show you the issue here, and this happens with XAML. So when you look here, down here, I have this label, and then I have this closing label spot, and this is what you want to be aware of with XAML. When I created my progress bar, I had my label selected. Then I clicked the progress bar. So it added the progress bar inside of the label, which is not really what I wanted to happen. So I'm going to have to go down here into my XAML. And if you didn't do this, don't worry about it. But this is a good learning lesson right here. I'm going to cut out that progress bar. I'm going to go right below the label ending, and I'm going to paste it up by itself. So now I have my progress bar here. Okay. And I'm going to save that, and now I'm going to try it again. And there we have it. So now we have this progress bar happening with the health. And B should be a different number. So how would we do that? Well, we can create a variable that actually will determine what the health is. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say dim health as integer. And it starts off at 0. And so I can do something like this, health, right? So what is health? Well, health is 0 right now, but every time A or B is chosen, I can say health equals 25. And then health equals 50. So now every time I click that, health will equal 25, and I'm adding the item, then I'm saying health equals 25, and then health equals 50. So let's see what happens here. So if I do that, if I do this, 25, 25, and 50, right? So I selected it the first time. Let me run this again. When I selected it the first time, you notice nothing happened. Why? Because, let's look at this. Health, when I selected it, health, this went first, right? And health is at 0. So when this went first, health became 0 and it added it to the health value. After that, then health became 50 without it adding to that. So you can see here that because of my logic, even though this did work, it looked like it didn't work the first time I clicked it. So when I click it again, health will be at 50, so then I'll see 50, as you can see there. But this is not really what we wanted to happen. I can do this a couple of ways. Because our application is only based on our clicks, is not really checking it all the time, I would have to change this around to something like this. So I would have to change the health first, then run this. Down here, I'd have to change the health first, then run that. Now you can see it working right off the bat. Okay. Now, maybe I only want the health to work when I'm selecting something. Okay. So really what I could do is I could put the health down here, and when I select it, you can try different things out. It's completely up to you. But really I don't like the fact that when I run it, the health pops into place. I want the health to kind of, you know, I want it to look cool. I want it to animate into place. So we already know that every time I add to this health, 1 to the health, it moves, it moves, it moves. It's almost like an animation. And the only way we can get an animation is with a loop. Okay, so what we're going to want to do is create a timer of some kind. And the way we do that in WPF, we use something called a dispatcher timer. So I'm going to go ahead and dim myself a timer, but I'm going to call it the dispatcher timer health. And that's going to be as a new dispatcher timer. Now you're not going to see this helping you out. Why? Because we don't have the imports required to let this work. So I'm going to go up here past the class declaration, and I'm going to type imports, and this is going to be the systems or system.window .threading, windows.threading. This is where this dispatcher timer comes. Now you'll see it change colors because now we actually have one. So we have to actually get the dispatcher timer started up here. Okay, so in order to get this started, we want it starting when the window starts. So our window, just like everything else, has its own class when it first starts. And that class is called a new class. So I'm going to go ahead and start a sub new. I'm going to type that out that way, and I'm going to hit enter key. When I do that, it automatically writes out this part for me because it needs this initialize components. After the initialize components is where I want to go ahead and complete my DT health. So I'm going to say DT health dot interval. And that's supposed to be a dot. That takes a time span. And that time span is going to be from ticks. Not from days, but from ticks. Now what this means is that for every 1 tick, I'm going to get my timer. My timer is going to go almost like a clock. Every tick, 1, 2. So if I did it from days, it'll wait 24 hours before it ticks over again. So you can do that also. And it's going to go by your computer clock. Now what I need to do is I need to add what's going to happen every time it ticks. And the way we do that in VB is we say add handler. C# is different, but this is how we do it in VB. And we're going to say DT health dot tick. What do we want to do every time it ticks is what we're saying. Well, we want it to go to the address of game loop. Now, we don't have a game loop, so we have to create a game loop. So I'm going to go down here and say private sub game loop. Now watch, it doesn't know what this is yet, but then once I make this, it automatically clears out because it knows that I now have a game loop, and inside that loop. Now every time this ticks, this will run. So it's like you see, it's like a clock. So what do I want to do every time this ticks? Well, what I want to do is I want to go to PB health, and I want to test out adding that value plus equals 1. All right, so every time this ticks, it's going to add 1 to the value of our health bar. Let me hit start. Now, this should not work, and I'm going to show you guys why. Okay. You notice nothing's different. Well, because even though we created this timer, it hasn't started yet. So what we're going to want to do is start this timer. So when the application starts, we're going to have to say DT health dot start. And this is what a lot of people forget sometimes. So that's why I didn't do it. Now, without me doing anything, it should run. As you can see, it ran all the way up to the top, right? But that's not really what we want. We don't want you having health right off the bat. We want to take that start and only add it when the button is clicked. So I'm going to hit play. Start. Sorry. So now, nothing. Not this button, but this button. As you can see, it went all the way to 100, right? And also that test works. So now we want to advance this. We want to say every time this reaches 100, every time this reaches 100, I want you to start back over again. Then I want you to stop the timer. So I would say if PB health dot value, we want to say if that's greater than 99, okay, then, and we can go even closer to that, sorry, 1 then. If it's greater than 99, then we want to say PB health dot value equals 0. We're starting it right back over, and then we're going to stop this timer. Instead of start, we'll say stop. As you can see, when I do this, it goes up and then it stops. Up and then it stops. It goes all the way up to 100%, then it stops. Now, it's happening way too fast, so I don't want 1 here. I'm going to want maybe 0.01, something like that, so I can see what's happening. So now when I hit start here, and then I hit that, as now that looks a lot better. That's much better. And so you want to fool around with this and see what you can do. You know, you have a lot of components that you can move around and check out. We have our loops, we have our ability to add things to a list, and you might want to go ahead and experiment with removing things from a list. One idea or one challenge for you is to try to figure out when you click on A, maybe it animates up to health or up to whatever the health is. Instead of animating all the way to 100, it's just going to animate up to the health area, and then it's going to leave it at that. That's maybe a challenge for you. You have all the tools here to do it, but hopefully this was helpful. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. Make sure you subscribe and make sure you share, and I'll see you guys next time.